Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, August 12th, 2022. Time to sell the show to the Russians, I guess, or something like that. Or, I don't know, spirit it away and bury it in Mar-a-Lago, or who knows, in Ivanka or Ivana Trump's grave, perhaps, at Bedminster. We don't know where these secrets are being kept. Check the safe. Not there. We'll have to look around. This morning's news, I guess you must have seen it by now. I have, I've seen people talking about it. We'll have to read it, but apparently the latest news from last night and into this morning is the nightmare scenario that everybody joked about in 2016 and onward, that when Donald Trump left the White House, he took everything that wasn't nailed down, including sensitive intelligence that could be sold to the highest bidder later on to pay off his massive debts. And I guess it includes some nuclear secrets as well. He, of course, claims that that's all lies. It's all a pack of lies. He denies all of it. And it's a big hoax. And just like everything else, it's a hoax, it's a hoax, it's a hoax. Although I will point out, as our Twitter friend Grudging One did for us earlier this morning, everything. There's not a single thing that Donald Trump has called a hoax that has ever actually been a hoax. Nothing at all. And as he points out, climate change, not a hoax. COVID, not a hoax. Russian collusion, no. Russian hacking, Ukrainian extortion, that Biden beat him in the election is a hoax. Oh, no. Okay, none of it held out. So, anyway, yes, this is, problematic, I think. Look, there's a Twitter trend on the subject now. FBI sought classified documents related to nuclear weapons during Mar-a-Lago search, according to the Washington Post. Maybe we ought to go and take a look at that particular post from the Post and get our backgrounder. Oh, and everybody's reporting it. I can't believe it, man. Oh, this is some video. All right. Twitter is the worst in terms of aggregating news through their algorithm. You just have to find people who are talking about it and linking directly to it. All right, so yesterday there was also the press conference, which I didn't watch, because who watches press conferences? I know, a lot of you did. But Merrick Garland scheduled a press conference for 2:30. I think he showed up about half an hour late, and so that was all the snarky jokes from the journalists waiting as if they can't just, cool their heels for a little bit to hear from the Justice Department about this unprecedented raid of a former president's home. But he did show up. He didn't give that much detail about it, except we learned that they basically were calling the Trump team's bluff. Trump and friends have been running around saying, if you have nothing to hide from this terrible hoax that you're pulling on me, release the warrant, release the information, release the manifest of what was seized from Mar-a-Lago, show it all, and then explain yourself. So the Department of Justice, in the form of Merrick Garland, came out to say, all right, we'll do that. We'll move to ask the court to unseal the warrant and what was taken. Importantly, not mentioned in all this unsealing, the affidavits that were sworn out in support of the warrant, and that might have all the information everybody would ever want, but they're still keeping that secret because they are still holding out the possibility of prosecuting a case against somebody for something anyway. And all of a sudden, we wouldn't be surprised to find out that things slow down in court. Will the Trump team take the opportunity that they now have to object for some strange or obscure reason or unclear reason or for no reason at all to the motion from the government to unseal this thing? If they, and if so, what do we think it's supposed to mean? What would they be trying to hide? Well, we'd have to unravel all of that and take a look. What can I tell you? Lots happening here. But yeah, like nuclear secrets, really? I mean, it's what everybody kind of imagined. But, well, there you go. Even some Republicans are beginning to worry, if you can believe it or not. Some of the things I put away in pocket, I mean, probably the rational way of handling this is to go back and to read the background stories, but I assume that you've all seen or have had word by now. I mean, you just heard me give it to you, but of what was allegedly among the documents seized. But yes, there are a couple of bits of news here. Let me see. Was it in a tweet that I saved that I had, or just something that I retweeted? Yes, Scott McFarlane tweeting this morning that a group of House Republicans who were planning a morning news conference about the Justice Department's search of Mar-a-Lago have canceled their news conference. That was at about 7:30 this morning. And but it does say another group will face reporters, McFarlane reports. House Intelligence Committee ranking member Michael Turner of Ohio has a news conference scheduled for 9:30 and has not canceled it yet. And last night, even before the news turned to the possibility of nuclear secrets being among those spirited away and hidden at Mar-a-Lago for some strange reason, there was word that certain people inside of Republican circles were circulating quiet warnings to other Republicans. You might not want to go that much further out on a limb for the president until this thing shakes out a little bit more. He could be in real trouble, and you don't want to be out there, doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on how it's all a hoax and evidence is being planted, et cetera, et cetera. But, well, what can you do? Even Ari Fleischer apparently has put out some Twitter statements designed to leave open an escape route, I guess. I don't know exactly how he set it up. I'll take a look at his Twitter timeline. But basically, he was saying yesterday, he began putting out, I'll make the case for him having done exactly what everyone is accusing him of, and I'll make the case for this being government overreach, and we'll see which one is the more likely. At any rate, he ended up by yesterday afternoon, even before I think we were all talking about them being nuclear secrets, he did come to this conclusion, which is kind of interesting, which you would have hoped that Republicans in the public eye would come to eventually. I think this was everybody's hope, that it would end at this stage rather than spill over into full denialism. But an interesting tweet from yesterday at 3:30. One thing I can't wrap my arms around: if Trump had classified documents, why didn't he give them back? Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe he thought they were declassified. Maybe he thought it was government overreach. But if, for whatever reason, you have a classified document at home, you give it back. Except, that's not what Trump is about, and he's not really about doing the right thing by anybody, even himself. And so, well, you're going to be stuck with this. Let's see. The other things he has been saying about, he's been quiet for about 12 hours now, but it's early in the morning yet. And at any rate, let's see. In view of this story from the Washington Post alleging anonymously, as he points out, that Trump took records relating to nuclear weapons, and we really ought to read that, I'm re-upping my tweet from yesterday describing the scenario in which Trump gets indicted, which I had alluded to earlier. That scenario, he describes it this way, saying this is not about routine National Archives presidential records. It's about code word or top secret documents that Trump took with him upon leaving the White House. If that were the case, then he would end up being indicted, according to Ari Fleischer. And he's spinning this story as, this is what it would take for it to really be serious and for it to go down this path. In his hectic last days, whether on purpose or not, Trump brought with him highly classified info. That means it's not the National Archives that wants the documents back. It's the CIA or possibly the Department of Defense. After negotiating to get them back, the DOJ, under pressure from CIA, got fed up. They already have a grand jury impaneled. A witness, possibly inside Mar-a-Lago, confirmed the existence of the documents and that Trump's team was under instructions not to return them. That explains why no subpoena was issued, except a subpoena was eventually issued, but that was in June. They went straight to a raid. That's not actually correct. It also explains why Trump's lawyers haven't released the inventory that the FBI gave them describing what information was seized. Trump's team doesn't want it known how highly classified the information is. From DOJ's point of view, that's the only reason that they would raid Mar-a-Lago. If this is about getting back Kim Jong-un's love letter to Trump or some minor matter like that, DOJ, he said, would be in deep trouble. And his final point, if this is about code word / top secret documents, Biden knows about it. He may not have been told when the raid would have taken place, but he would have been informed that Trump has the documents. Well, certainly should be true at some point. Let's see. Where's the... he must have linked, there we are, to the Washington Post story. We might as well read the background story so we can all be, including me, clearer on the details. FBI searched Trump's home to look for nuclear documents and other items, sources say. Devlin Barrett, Josh Dawsey, Perry Stein, and Shane Harris reporting on this story. The former president said on social media that he won't oppose a Justice Department request to unseal the search warrant. We'll see what, if anything, comes of unsealing the affidavit, but eventually in court, I suppose, we'd have to hear about that. Classified documents relating to nuclear weapons were among the items FBI agents sought in a search of former President Donald Trump's Florida residence on Monday, according to people familiar with the investigation. Oh, and if they ever find that he actually stuffed them in his socks and took them with him to Bedminster ahead of the raid, that'll make a tremendous story. And I am not the only person to suggest that he buried them in Ivanka's casket either, by the way. There are many people. I know. Do I think so? No, because he wanted to access them. But it's weird, he's weird, and really nothing should be put past him at this point. Experts in classified information said the unusual search underscores deep concern among government officials about the types of information that they thought could be located at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club and potentially in danger of falling into the wrong hands. Can you believe that? I know, it's difficult to understand why they didn't believe that his hands were, in fact, the wrong hands. It's too late for that. The fact that they made it to Mar-a-Lago means they were already in the wrong hands. The people who described some of the material that agents were seeking spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing investigation. They did not offer additional details about what type of information the agents were seeking, including whether it involved weapons belonging to the United States or some other nation. Nor did they say if such documents were recovered as part of the search. A Trump spokesman did not respond to a request for comment. The DOJ FBI declined to comment. Attorney General Merrick Garland said Thursday that he could not discuss the investigation, but in an unusual public statement at the Justice Department, he announced he had personally authorized the decision to seek court permission for a search warrant. I think everybody expected that. The fact that it involved a former president likely meant that, yeah, you will need to clear this with me if it ever comes to that. And, of course, this would be him fulfilling his promise to go where the evidence led. The only question is, what was the evidence and what was it evidence of? Like yesterday, I guess we're still not 100% out of the woods on the possibility that it really was just about, well, the law says those documents belong here, but they are there. And if they're there, that's just a prima facie evidence that there's been a violation of the law. We can't just walk away from an open and shut case, even if there isn't something particularly important or sensitive at the bottom of it. A violation is a violation. When it's this clear, you got to do something, and who knows what else might be missing as a result of knowing that he's been so comfortable in breaking that law already. But if you also happen to know, oh yeah, among those things are some nuclear secrets, well then, that's all the more reason. Garland spoke moments after Justice Department lawyers filed a motion seeking to unseal the search warrant in the case, noting that Trump had publicly revealed the search shortly after it happened. And I wonder, that must have been, or may have been anyway, part of the delay. He was supposed to be on at 2:30. It took him 20 to 30 minutes to get there. It may have taken longer to finish and file that motion than they originally anticipated, and he didn't really want to start speaking until he could say that the motion had been filed already. Well, anyway, we'll see. That said, the former president... Oh, well, there's a little bit of a quote here. The public's clear and powerful interest in understanding what occurred under these circumstances weighs heavily in favor of unsealing, the motion says. That said, the former president should have an opportunity to respond to this motion and lodge objections, including with regards to any legitimate privacy interests or the potential for other injury if these materials are made public. Late Thursday night, Trump said on social media that he agreed the document should be made public. Which document, we don't know for sure. I mean, we think that he's supposedly meant the warrant, but later on he'll tell us he didn't mean that one. In another post early Friday, he called the nuclear weapons issue a, quote, hoax, and accused the FBI of planting evidence without offering information to indicate that such a thing had happened. Okay, why they went with information rather than evidence, I'm not sure. Anyway, Trump said agents did not allow his lawyers to be present for the search, which is not unusual in a law enforcement operation, especially if it potentially involves classified items. Material about nuclear weapons is especially sensitive because they can kill so many millions of people, and usually restricted to a small number of government officials, experts said. Publicizing details about U.S. weapons could provide an intelligence roadmap to adversaries, I have to slow down and say it that way, seeking to build ways of countering those systems, and other countries might view exposing their nuclear secrets as a threat. You think? I think so too. Right. And, people have gotten in trouble for this sort of thing in the past. Ethel and Julius Rosenberg would like to know why they're dead and Donald Trump isn't. But, I can't answer that question. And, of course, they were much older. Anyway, one former Justice Department official who in the past oversaw investigations of leaks of classified information said the type of top secret information described by the people familiar with the probe would probably cause authorities to try to move as quickly as possible to recover sensitive documents that could cause grave harm to U.S. security. If that's true, it would suggest that material residing unlawfully at Mar-a-Lago may have been classified at the highest classification level, said David Laufman, the former chief of the Justice Department's counterintelligence section, which investigates leaks of classified information. If the FBI and the Department of Justice believed there were top-secret material still at Mar-a-Lago, that would lend itself to a greater hair-on-fire motivation to recover the material as quickly as possible. The Monday search of Trump's home by FBI agents has caused a political furor about the furor, with Trump and many of his Republican defenders accusing the FBI of acting out of politically motivated malice. Some have threatened the agency on social media. As Garland spoke Thursday, police in Ohio, another small point to make here, were engaged in a standoff with an armed man who allegedly tried to storm the Cincinnati office of the FBI. The man was killed by police later that day. Authorities said negotiations had failed, as they had with getting the return of the documents sought by the federal agents on Monday. But they didn't kill Donald Trump. He wasn't there anyway. State and federal officials declined to name the man or describe a potential motive. However, they're going to go ahead and do it, right? State and federal officials wouldn't do it, but local law enforcement officials identified him as Ricky Schiffer. According to another law enforcement official, agents are investigating Schiffer's possible ties to extremist groups, which really he didn't even need. He was an extremist all by himself. But apparently he had some ties, including to the Proud Boys, whose leaders are accused of helping launch the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Both officials spoke on condition of anonymity, of course. And let's see, a person using Schiffer's name on Truth Social, Trump's social media site, posted a call to arms message shortly after Monday's FBI search became public. They don't know for sure whether or not it's real, or if it's the same guy. People, this is it. The message reads, leave work tomorrow as soon as the gun shop / Army Navy store / pawn shop opens. Get whatever you need to be ready for combat, like collector item baseball cards to throw at people, I guess. We must not tolerate this one. They have been conditioning us to accept tyranny and think we can't do anything for 2 years. This time we must respond with force and then be executed along with the Rosenbergs, I guess. And he's dead. He's dead. He bought Trump's BS, as Greg would tell you.
That's bullshit.
It certainly is. And he bought it, and now after that, he bought it again. He bought Trump's BS, and now he's bought the farm. And it literally bought a farm because apparently he was having a shootout with the cops from a cornfield, which is unusual. It's a nice twist. I'm glad to have the little bit of interest there. Thrown into the otherwise routine armed standoff ending in the death of a Trump supporter who was trying to lash out and strike violently against the FBI for catching the former president involved in espionage. Whatever. The Washington Post could not confirm whether the account actually belonged to Schiffer. So that's, worth noting. In his statement on Thursday, Garland defended FBI agents as dedicated patriotic public servants and said he would not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked. Every day they protect the American people from violent crime, espionage as well, terrorism and other threats to their safety while safeguarding our civil rights. They do so at great personal sacrifice and risk to themselves. I am honored to work alongside them. It was Garland's first public appearance or comment since agents executed this warrant at the Mar-a-Lago Club, taking about a dozen boxes of materials after opening a safe and entering a padlocked storage area. The search was one of the most dramatic developments in a cascade of legal investigations of the former president, several of which appear to be growing in intensity. The investigation into the improper handling of documents began months ago when the National Archives and Records Administration sought the return of materials taken to Mar-a-Lago from the White House. 15 boxes of documents and items, some of them marked classified, were returned early this year. The archives subsequently asked the Justice Department to investigate, and now they've had to remove another 12 boxes. It turns out. Former senior intelligence officials said in interviews that during the Trump administration, highly classified intelligence about sensitive topics, including about intelligence gathering on Iran, was routinely mishandled. Oh no, but her emails. One former official said, the most highly classified information often ended up in the hands of personnel who didn't appear to have a need to possess it or weren't authorized to read it, or who may have later gotten $2 billion invested in their hedge fund by the Saudis. Possibly. You just don't know. That former official also said signals intelligence intercepted electronic communications, such as emails, and phone calls of foreign leaders was among the type of information that often ended up with unauthorized personnel. Such intercepts are among the most closely guarded secrets because of what they can reveal about how the United States has penetrated foreign governments. A person familiar with the inventory of the 15 boxes taken from Mar-a-Lago in January indicated that signals intelligence material was included in them. Why did he have it? We don't know. The precise nature of the information also unclear. The former officials and the other individuals spoke on condition of anonymity. You need to know that, I suppose. This spring, Trump's team received a grand jury subpoena in connection with the documents investigation. Two people familiar with the investigation, also anonymous, have said. Investigators visited Mar-a-Lago in the weeks following the issuance of the subpoena, and Trump's team handed over some material. The subpoena was first reported by Just the News, a conservative media outlet run by John Solomon, who's an inveterate liar, but appears to have had a nugget of information to work with here. One of Trump's recently designated representatives to the National Archives, by the way. So there you go. You should never be involved in the news like that when you're a journalist, but this guy just blurring the line, I guess. But he had information about the subpoena. He broke the news because he was a named custodian of Trump's records, but Trump had stolen his records from the National Archives. And when the subpoena was delivered, John knew about it because that's who gets notified when the NARA folks and the FBI agents come to say the records that you've been designated as custodian of are needed by the federal government. They belong to them and you have stolen them. Or your man has stolen them and you're the custodian. People familiar with the probe have said it is focused on whether the former president or his aides withheld classified or other government material that should have been returned to the government earlier. The people who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss the investigation also said that as authorities engaged in months of discussions on the subject, some officials came to suspect the Trump team was not being truthful. What? No, I can't believe it. Pressure had been building for Garland to say something so the public could understand why the Justice Department and a federal magistrate judge believed the extraordinary step of executing a search warrant at the home of former president, but foreign president just the same, was necessary. But Garland had stuck with his practice of not discussing ongoing investigations. Upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly without fear or favor, Garland said on Thursday. Under my watch, that is precisely what the Justice Department is doing. Trump and his allies have refused to publicly share a copy of the warrant, even as they and their supporters have denounced the search as unlawful and politically motivated, but provided no evidence to back that up. Lawyers for the former president can respond to the government's filing with any objections to unsealing the warrant, leaving it to the judge to overseeing the case to decide. Trump could also publicly release the warrant himself. We also know the judge ordered the Justice Department to confer with lawyers for Trump and alert the court by 3 p.m. Friday, that's today, as to whether Trump objects to the unsealing. The motion is embedded here in Scribd format if you want to take a look at it as we get ready for our first 2-minute break. If it's made public, the warrant would probably reveal a general description of what materials were being sought at Mar-a-Lago and what crimes they could be connected to. A list of the inventory that agents took from the property would also be released. Details, though, could be limited, particularly if the material collected includes classified documents. In addition to the anti-law enforcement threats and vitriol on social media sites and elsewhere this week, the furor over the search warrant has led to threats against the judge who approved the warrant request. Hey, I have more on that. Can you believe it? And it comes after the break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, let's see where we need to catch up with all the rest of this. We have the end of the Washington Post piece to read. We might as well. We're actually within sight of the end here. Where were we? Yes. In addition to the anti-law enforcement threats and vitriol on social media sites, now there's threats against the judge. There's more about that. The Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, the professional association representing 31,000 federal law enforcement officers and agents, said in a statement Wednesday evening that its agents had received extreme threats of violence this week. All law enforcement understand their work makes them a target for criminal actors, wrote the group's president, Larry Cosme, in case you needed to know who it was. However, the politically motivated threats of violence against the FBI this week are unprecedented in recent history and absolutely unacceptable. That's right. It's unacceptable. Please do not. We will not accept this. I mean, it's true. It's unacceptable. But I'm so tired of hearing that things are unacceptable because they keep going on. And, of course, I'm sure in other comments they would have made reference to the fact that, well, there's politically motivated threats, and then there was an actual attack against the Cincinnati field office of the FBI, resulting in a shootout that killed the assailant, which is also kind of unacceptable, I think. Republicans around Trump initially thought the raid could help him politically. There's more on that, too. But are now bracing for revelations that could be damaging, a person familiar with the matter said, speaking on condition of anonymity. You know, everybody's speaking on conditions of anonymity today. So let's see. That points in about 15 different directions. Republicans initially thought the raid could help them politically, and then they decided to cancel their press conferences, except the one person that I mentioned earlier, who is a Republican from Ohio, which makes a difference, as Darwin points out, I think rightly here. This Ohio congressman would definitely not be canceling his press conference since he just had an attack on the FBI in his state. So he'll probably want to talk about that. Yes, I think that's a good point. So well taken there. The other thing that I guess I would throw in here about threats against the law enforcement and against the judge. Here's some fun news from Yahoo News, but the entertainment news for some reason. It's in Yahoo Entertainment. Fox News tries to pass off fake image of judge who approved Mar-a-Lago warrant as real. That seems kind of non-journalistic and strange, and maybe we ought to look into it. To finish up his duties as guest host on Tucker Carlson Tonight on Thursday, Tucker Carlson last night, in other words, Brian Kilmeade showed a clearly photoshopped image of Judge Bruce Reinhart, who signed off on the FBI raid at former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort that has dominated the news since Monday. The image took a 2017 post from Judge Reinhart and put his body, interestingly, they put his body onto that of deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, getting his foot rubbed by Ghislaine Maxwell, who's now in prison for her part in Epstein's crimes against minors, despite the fact that the image that Fox News used was credited to the Twitter handle what I mean to say, except it's what I meme to say, except they didn't use the second E in meme. So I don't really know what that's supposed to mean, but there it is. But aside from the fact that was credited that way, Kilmeade tried to pass it off as real. I guess he felt like maybe if I can one-up Tucker while I'm guest hosting, I doubt they'll replace Tucker with me, but maybe they'll give me my own show too, and I can run around using it to bedevil my political opponents with lies. Well, okay. So where were we with this? Here, quote from what Kilmeade said. Also, a picture of Bruce Reinhart, Kilmeade said while bringing up the image. This is the judge in charge of the as you know, of the warrant. And we'll see if he's going to release it next. He likes Oreos and whiskey. Is that in the picture or something? I mean, I don't know why you would say that, but maybe there's Oreos and whiskey in the picture. I haven't seen the picture. Okay, Fox and Kilmeade were called out for the indiscretion online, and even by Sean Hannity at that, who pointed out that it is fake as they transitioned to his show. But Kilmeade pushed back. How do you like that? Sean, can you relate to that? Kilmeade asked. I think that's actually a picture of Jeffrey Epstein with somebody putting his head on there. Hannity replied. I'm guessing. I don't know. It might be his plane, Kilmeade responded. Who knows? Well, okay. Well, maybe they'll show the picture now. Now that I've clicked to get more of the story. Apparently no, I guess not. Some transcript of the video that goes like this. Brian Kilmeade saying, I don't know what he sounds like. Should I give him some kind of idiot voice? Well, anyway. Kilmeade says, meanwhile, before we go, make sure you catch me on stage, Albany, New York, at The Egg. Just go to briankilmeade.com. Don't do that. Also, a picture of Bruce Reinhart. What kind of introduction is that of this picture? So I guess from this, we're supposed to take away that maybe it's possible that Kilmeade actually did know that it was a fake and he was just trying to sneak it in to be funny at the end. I don't know. Kylie Marr then speaks, and I don't know who that is, but says, on Tucker Carlson Tonight, Thursday, with guest host Brian Kilmeade, Fox News showed a clearly photoshopped image. Oh, I guess. Okay, so she's a news announcer for what? On Fox? I have no idea. On Tucker Carlson Tonight, with guest host Brian Kilmeade, Fox News showed a clearly photoshopped image of Judge Bruce Reinhart, who signed off on the FBI raid of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. The image took a 2017 post from Reinhart while he was waiting out a hurricane, hoping to watch the New York Giants, and put his image over that of deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein getting his foot rubbed by Ghislaine Maxwell. And even though the image Fox showed was credited to this Twitter handle, Kilme tried to pass it off as real. So basically, okay, what I just read must be a transcript of a video clip from I don't even know where, and as a service to those who are hearing impaired. I guess they must have placed the transcript down here. I thought it was further information about the story, but it's in fact the same damn thing over again, but apparently absolutely necessary because not everybody is hearing and able to listen to the audio that accompanies the video that's embedded that long since has switched over to some other dumb entertainment news that I don't care about. Okay, well, we'll never get those minutes back in our lives, but I thought it was fairly important to make note of the weird things that they were doing out there. Let's see. Goodness, what else shall we add? There was some. We've already covered the shootout with this suspect who attacked the Cincinnati office. So let's jump back into Pocket and see what else I've parked there. There was a lot that I parked for what I hoped would be a regular Friday show where we could do lots of not necessarily political things that had some political angle to them, because everything has a political angle to it, but that was not immediate reaction to the news. But who knows whether we'll get to some of those things. Let's see. There is more information about the threats against the judge from Vice News. Far-right extremists are violently threatening the Trump search warrant judge, including such gems as, let's find out if he has children, where they go to school, where they live, everything. One person wrote on a message board where the judge's address was posted. David Gilbert reporting this for Vice News. Far-right extremists on pro-Donald Trump message boards and social networks are making violent anti-Semitic threats against the judge, who reportedly signed the warrant that allowed the FBI to search the former president's Mar-a-Lago property in Florida. I don't know if they'll get around to this or not, but I did read yesterday that they found out, one, who the judge was, two, that the judge was Jewish, and three, what temple this judge attends, and have made threats against the temple, causing them to cancel their Shabbat evening services, which I guess were supposed to take place tonight. And I guess they had something special planned, too, a Shabbat service on the beach, which would have been real nice to attend, I'm sure. But that's all out the window now because MAGA wants to murder the judge, and blah, 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 something about freedom of religion and how we love Jews and we support them and I love Israel, etc., but let's kill as many as possible. That was always the case, though. They always supported, quote-unquote, supported Israel to the extent that they could facilitate what they believed was the second coming, the return of Jesus and the rapture, which for some reason they also insist includes the death of all Jews. So, hey, whatever. Anyway, multiple members of these toxic online communities are even posting what appears to be Judge Reinhardt's home address, phone numbers, and the names of his family members alongside threats of extreme violence. I can use my censorship horn to give a lighter air to all of this. This is the piece of judge who approved FBI's raid on Alago. They didn't really, but I'm going to do things that way. Do it as Aruga Alago from now on. A user wrote on the pro-Trump message board, formerly known as The Donald, I see a rope around his neck. Hey, you can get away with anything. Responding, another user wrote, IDGAF. You know what that means, and I don't have to censor it because it's just a bunch of letters. IDGAF anymore. Name, address, put that all up on here because he's so soulful. Anyway, moments later, a different member replied with what appears to be Reinhardt's current address, phone numbers, previous addresses, and names of possible relatives. In another post on the same message board, one user commented, let's find out if he has children. You heard that one earlier. The These threats of violence and anti-Semitic slurs on a range of platforms, including 4chan, Telegram, Getter, Gab. I believe Gab is the one that's run by the person who is now the chief spokesperson for Doug Mastriano's campaign for governor in Pennsylvania. Just want to point that out. And Trump's own platform called Truth Social were all first uncovered by Advanced Democracy, a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization that conducts public interest investigations. The threats against Judge Reinhardt in the wake of the Mar-a-Lago raid are significant, said Daniel Jones, founder of Advanced Democracy. In addition to the anti-Semitic and violent slurs, we're seeing his address and other personal information being shared online with the implied or explicit purpose of a, quote, real-life action. A message board where a number of these threats were posted also happens to be the same one where many of those involved in the January 6th Capitol riot posted threats of violence in the lead-up to January 6th. These threats against the judge, Jones told Vice News, are all the more alerting? Okay. Given the events of January 6th, these threats made against Reinhardt and his family didn't occur in a vacuum. Within hours of searching the FBI searching Trump's Palm Beach home, the former president's supporters reacted furiously, calling for civil war, the dismantling of the FBI, and other dumb things. As Trump has scrambled to explain why his home was searched, he also has pushed conspiracy theories about the FBI supposedly planting evidence there. Right-wing news outlets have also tried to connect the judge to convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Reinhardt worked as a federal prosecutor until 2008, and a day after he quit, he became a defense attorney for a number of Epstein's employees, including his pilots and a scheduler, according to his 2018 Miami Herald report. The link, I think it was supposed to be this Miami Herald report, but it just says his. I don't think it's his. It's theirs. The link between Reinhardt and Epstein has been weaponized by Trump supporters to incorrectly imply Reinhardt was Epstein's own lawyer and by extension was therefore corrupt and possibly a pedophile. Because why not? They just say that about everybody. A small note, in light of these accusations, Trump had a long personal relationship with Epstein and famously once told the New York Magazine he was a, quote, terrific guy. I'm glad they threw that in there. On fringe message board 4chan, one user posted an image of Reinhardt with the caption about that judge who signed that search warrant. Bruce Reinhardt once quit his job as a U.S. attorney to work for Jeffrey Epstein. Another 4chan user wrote in response, that is a, censored term for referring to a Jewish person and a pedophile. He should be tried for treason and executed. What do you know? What a great idea. Let me file that away in case we think of somebody else who want to be tried for treason and executed. The U.S. Marshals are responsible for the protection of federal judicial process, and we take that responsibility very seriously. A spokesperson for the U.S. Marshals told Vice News when asked for comment about the threats, and while we do not discuss specific security measures, we continuously review the measures in place and take appropriate steps to ensure the integrity of the federal judicial process. The FBI deferred comment to the Marshals. U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida told Vice News the court has no comment. I think at this point, I guess we could share in that light something I saw Brian Beutler pointing out earlier today. So if I can scroll just a little bit and find it, then I can just read it verbatim instead of trying to recall the gist of it. But where was it? There we are. Just weeks ago, he says, the GOP as I like to call the GOP bullied Dem leaders into expediting special security for SCOTUS justices to squelch peaceful protests. Today, Dem leaders cower while GOP goons make clear any future judges who subject Trump to the rule of law may well be murdered. And can't testify to whether or not the Dems are, in fact, cowering at this point, but they're not. I think Brian's major point here is they're not out there forcefully pushing back on this stuff and saying, just weeks ago we had bipartisan agreement. As soon as the Republicans started screeching that protests outside of the houses of Supreme Court justices was an enormous risk to them, we jumped in and agreed so that, so you wouldn't beat us, wouldn't attack us with it and scare us in the upcoming election. But nonetheless, we did do it. And of course, like idiots, we expect you to return the favor, and they're never going to. It's actually part of a longer thread that Brian's been carrying on for quite some time. How far back does it go? Well, not as far back as I thought, but let's see. From August 9th, tweeting. He's always got interesting points to make about this. Let's see. Oh, reacting to the tweet of Peter Schulman, an historian who made the comment, what else should they say? Talking about, the provenance of this goes even further back. Will Stansel saying Republicans, like an imaginary dialogue thing, Republicans, treason, fascism, conspiracy. This is a declaration of war. Stand back and stand by. Locked and loaded. You'll rue this day. Democrats answering, let's keep a dignified silence and talk about kitchen table issues. Well, okay, I can agree that it sometimes feels like that's exactly what they're doing. Peter Schulman then says, well, what else should they say? They don't know anything about the case or documents or circumstances or possible charges or anything, so why dig themselves into a hole? Pelosi's response seems absolutely appropriate. So you might say, okay, well, yeah, then there's that. Then you might say, as Brian does, well, they could say that Republican leaders calling for the investigation to be sabotaged, that they are doing that, and that for the FBI to be dismantled to protect Trump are corrupt thugs, and Congress will vote on protecting the integrity of these investigations and making sure they're adequately resourced. Well, yeah. I mean, that does sound kind of milquetoast, actually, by comparison. This is why, he says, I found Schumer's unwillingness to vilify McCarthy last night troubling. Fine. Don't comment on an investigation you know nothing about, but if you won't take the people trying to discredit it, won't take on the people trying to discredit it, they'll win the battle for narrative control. Probably true. Another fake dialogue. Them. This is treason and we plan to put a stop to it. Us. We have no comment except that process is good and would now like to discuss other things. All right. Yes. Well, that's kind of the way they've handled it. In this week's PD cast, as he calls his Positively Dreadful, is that his podcast? Peter Strzok and I, that's Brian Beutler, talked at length about the importance of reassessing norms and discarding ones that don't serve the public well in the face of right-wing onslaught against any norm in their path. This is a perfect example. And then he goes on also to say Pelosi and Schumer don't have to respond to Republicans smearing these investigations by high-fiving and talking about how Trump is totally guilty, but they could make the party line Republican corruption the issue here by defending the investigations from their attacks. The brief progressive defund clamor, which reverberates years later, followed the umpteenth police murder of a black citizen, by the way. The all-consuming GOP clamor to abolish the FBI and court civil war is, by contrast, to give Trump free rein to steal and sell U.S. secrets, commit sedition, etc. Seems like a possible vulnerability, as he points out. Dems can supersede these stories by vilifying Republicans for their corrupt cover-up and taking steps to protect Trump investigations from GOP sabotage. Or they can tread cautiously on the high ground and let the institutions bend to the uncontested forces threatening retaliation. I promise you don't need to waste 3 days and $50,000 to first see if defending the country from criminals polls well. Good point. Okay, and that's even before he got around to the comment that I first started out with. And then he's waiting, looking at all the attacks that are happening and just saying any day now, any day they could pick up and push back. Absent Democratic counter-criticism to drown them out, Republicans seem like they might succeed in penetrating and subverting this investigation simply by being a loud, obnoxious minority. Imagine what they'll do with a majority. We are coming to those elections. And then finally, that good point that just weeks ago, Republicans bullied Dems into making special security for judges a immediate priority. Democrats complied and will get no such compliance from Republicans. And let's see. He goes on, this continues, and it's not just bad for Dems. Republicans are going to subvert this investigation, and they've left an indelible impression on DOJ, FBI, and the judiciary. Further subject Trump to rule of law, and the GOP will threaten their jobs and lives, but Dems won't be there to defend them. Instead, let's talk about semiconductors. Yay, they passed the chips. Okay. At any rate, it goes on for quite some time, but I think he's making an excellent point. I'll leave that up there so I can include it in the roundup. What else did I want to take you on a tour of? Well, there's an awful lot. Let's see. Maybe we shift from this. Let's see. Oh, well, here's the NBC News article where Trump denies that there were nuclear documents. Does he give a quote? Is it of any use? I mean, we knew he was going to deny this, obviously, but I doubt there's much more to it than the fact that he says, oh, it's terrible and it's a hoax. And I don't even really care what the quote is now that I think about it. So let's see. Moving on with the few minutes prior to the break, let me try and sneak in one more item about this just to kind of alert you to what else is going on. Aaron Blake took a moment to use the Fix column today to, I guess, warn us about something we're already seeing and you might see over the weekend. Fox News and Trump have debuted a new baseless defense. And of course, the defense is, what about Obama? What about Obama? What does that mean? Let's find out. Here's what they're saying. I mean, I don't know offhand. Let's see. On few previous occasions has the Trump movement so embraced Stephen K. Bannon's strategy, paraphrased here, of flooding the zone with garbage. I think garbage is the paraphrase here. As after the FBI executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. Prominent Republicans and conservative pundits have pushed suggestions that Biden himself ordered the search. That's not true. That the FBI planted evidence. That does not appear to be true. Certainly no evidence of planting the evidence, but okay, we'll talk about it. And posited all manner of other theories, all without even the slightest hints of evidence to back up these suggestions. But when it comes to the sheer embrace of innuendo and a concerted lack of logical consistency, it's difficult to top the latest entry. What is it, Aaron? Well, I'll tell you, he says. I don't know what his voice sounds like. Over the past 24 hours, conservative media have debuted a new whataboutism defense. What about Obama? Several Fox News shows on Wednesday picked up on a New York Post column that noted Barack Obama, at the end of his presidency, had 30 million records shipped to Chicago for his presidential library. They shipped 30 million pages of sensitive and possibly classified materials to Chicago. And by the way, he has yet to return any of it to the National Archives. Not one page, Fox host Sean Hannity intoned. So, is his house about to get raided? Former Trump campaign legal advisor Harmeet Dillon added on Jesse Waters' show, are there SWAT teams descending on Chicago to get those documents? No. And so the double standard and triple standard here is very apparent. Now, triple standard would bring it back to your side, but never mind that. As you know, 3 rights make a left, so a triple standard. He didn't even think that through. Waters added, now Obama has got boxes of stuff in Chicago, but Trump is not allowed to have a love letter from Little Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un. Trump and Donald Trump Jr. were also on the case, promoting the New York Post's story on social media, and the elder Trump was at it again on Thursday. Here is a screen grab, I guess, of his Truth Social message, carried to Twitter by Jenna Ellis with the emoji. Trump asking, what happened to the 30 million pages of documents taken from the White House to Chicago by Barack Hussein Obama? He refused to give them back. What is going on? This act was strongly at odds with NARA. Will they be breaking into Obama's, quote, mansion in Martha's Vineyard, which also isn't in Chicago? And by the way, he lives in Calorama section of Washington, D.C., chiefly, I believe. But okay, yes, he has a home in Chicago, but they weren't shipped to his house, for one thing. And anyway, we'll get to the real story here. And then again, more details. On Thursday afternoon, after Attorney General Merrick Garland announced he would move to unseal the Mar-a-Lago search warrant, once again tweeting or sending out his Truth Social message and then somebody screen grabbing it and bringing it to Twitter. which I think is hilarious because nobody's actually on Truth Social. The only reason anybody else besides Trump is there is to screen cap his messages, which we should probably stop doing at some point. But what did he have to say? I continue to ask, what happened to the 33 million pages of documents taken to Chicago by President Obama? The fake news media refuses to talk about that. They want it canceled. Good use of the word there. It's the kind of thing that sounds superficially similar to someone with no base level knowledge of how these processes work, but it's a ridiculous comparison wielded by people who in many cases probably do know better. And you can tell that if you look closely at how it's being portrayed. The first thing to note is that the New York Post's piece, an opinion column, by the way, doesn't connect the dots and draw a parallel between Trump and Obama in the same way these pundits were so eager to do. They're just laundering it this way. It merely casts the Trump search as spotlighting alleged problems with the Presidential Records Act, the law at issue when it comes to documents Trump might have illegally stashed at Mar-a-Lago, except the nuclear ones, which would come under a different law. It notes the Obama administration records that were shipped to Chicago have yet to be made available in digital form. At the end of his presidency, Barack Obama trucked 30 million pages of his administration's records to Chicago, promising to digitize them and eventually put them online, a move that outraged historians. More than 5 years after Obama's presidency ended, the National Archives webpage reveals that 0 pages have been digitized and disclosed. That's not great. People can file requests via the Freedom of Information Act, a law Obama helped wreck, says this columnist in the New York Post, to access Obama records, but responses from presidential libraries can be delayed for years, even more than a decade if the information is classified. As with many issues of government transparency and document sharing, it's true that this is not great. You often have to wait years for requested documents, and this appears to be no exception. There was also plenty of criticism of the decision to break with precedent and digitize the documents rather than house them physically in a traditional library. But, well, there's more, and we'll continue with it after this 1-minute break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's finish up Aaron Blake's piece about the latest nonsense being brought forward by Republicans, this whataboutism accusing Barack Obama of stealing 133 million bajillion pages of totally classified nuclear stuff, and no one's doing anything. Well, of course, it bears no resemblance to what prompted the Trump search, any of this stuff. It was reported back in late 2016 that the Obama team was transferring the records to Chicago through the National Archives, which legally owns the documents once a president leaves office. So did Obama pick up the boxes and put them on a truck and send them to Chicago? No. He asked the National Archives, can we have this stuff shipped to Chicago from my presidential library? And they said, yeah, sure, and put it on trucks themselves. That is different. Of course, they probably believed that he would have this stuff digitized a lot faster, and I think anybody would have been right in assuming that he was going to do that faster than he has. I don't know what the answer is about that, but they haven't asked for them back. But they did ask for what Trump had back, and Trump wouldn't give it to them, and then they took it because that's the way it works. And I guess this stuff is still in the control of the National Archives and Records Administration, even though it's in Chicago, and I guess they can take it back if they think the digitizing is going too slow. But they haven't made such a move. Well, once the documents ultimately reached a warehouse in Chicago, not his house, there would be no sense in raiding his house in Chicago or his house in Martha's Vineyard, if indeed he has one, but I think he borrows someone else's, or his home in Washington, D.C., because the documents aren't there. It's what's unusual is that they would be locked up in the basement or the desk or the safe of the actual former president's home. That's not been done. Okay. Until now. In which case, I'm wrong. It has been done. At any rate, so they're in a warehouse in Chicago, and then, of course, still under the control of the National Archives. The Obama Foundation was supposed to pay the National Archives and Records Administration to digitize the documents. The lengthiness of that process aside, there isn't the faintest hint of legal violations, nor does the Post's story suggest as much. The faintest hint of evidence, of course, is currently surplus to requirements on many portions of the right. Hannity stated conspiratorially that, quote, they shipped 30 million pages of sensitive and possibly classified materials to Chicago. No, without noting that the they included the National Archives. So to the extent that anything that was shipped to Chicago is classified or sensitive, ask the National Archives and Records Administration why they did it, because that's who did it. Not Trump, not Obama, not nobody. The implication is that perhaps Obama, too, is surreptitiously obscuring his sensitive documents, but without being searched. But there's no evidence that he has hidden anything from the archives, or that he didn't go through the processes required to share and protect those documents once they leave Washington. That's the crux of the matter with Trump. The archives has said on the record that it previously retrieved 15 boxes from Mar-a-Lago that should have been turned over to it, but weren't. And the Washington Post has reported that some of those documents were labeled classified and even top secret. The search this week was geared toward other documents that should have been turned over, but which the government believed to still be in Trump's possession. There is a difference between having government documents and having government documents that you, for some reason, didn't disclose to the archives and or perhaps aren't sufficiently protecting. There is actual evidence for a former president doing the latter, with the caveat that we still don't know much about the evidence presented to obtain the search warrant. That's the blindingly obvious reason that one ex-president was searched while the other wasn't. So there you go, in case you run into that one over the weekend. All right, let's see. Other things that I definitely wanted to share with you. And some things that have come in the meantime. First of all, I retweeted Darwin's sharing with the KITM hashtag the video of that end of the Tucker Carlson show, guest hosted by Brian Kilmeade, and the nature of his effort to sneak in that photoshopped image. Let's see. We also have shared from forward.com, not my favorite source, but the most likely to have covered this issue, sent to us by John Ponzi Coin Shiflet. I like that. Has sent us the forwards article. The judge who approved the Trump warrant is attacked for synagogue ties. And I don't know whether he's, that's an odd way of putting it. Attacked, I guess, via his synagogue ties, but attacked for having synagogue ties. Is that just the anti-Semitic part of it? I guess we'll take a look at how they're expressing it here. What's the body of the piece say? Louis Keene and Madeline Fixler reporting this again in Forward. The judge who approved the search on former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate was attacked Tuesday for his synagogue involvement by a retired Major League Baseball player. What is getting weird? By Wednesday, an online mob was making violent anti-Semitic threats against him, and then it's illustrated by a photo of armed guards being posted outside the gates. Interestingly, these are armed guards posted outside the gates of Mar-a-Lago. I thought, maybe these are the gates to his synagogue, but no. All right, well, they just wanted armed guards and something to do with Donald Trump. Not sure about that photo selection, but okay. Judge Bruce Reinhardt, a former prosecutor who had previously been criticized for representing former employees of Jeffrey Epstein, appears to be on the board of a South Florida synagogue. Trump loyalists eager to question the legitimacy of the FBI raid seized upon that detail. What began with Lenny Dykstra, sorry New York Mets and Philadelphia Phillies fans, but Lenny Dykstra is kind of a scumbag. What began with Lenny Dykstra, a retired New York Mets legend, is how they describe him here, questioning the nature of the conservative synagogue's Judaism, spilled over onto right-wing social media platforms and message boards where users publish the judge's name, address, and personal information. Threats have been directed at Reinhardt's children and supposedly family members as well. On Thursday, a synagogue member told the Forward that the synagogue's beachside Shabbat service had been canceled because of the social media hate. Another user, or one user on 4chan, wrote about that judge that signed the search warrant. Bruce, okay, you've heard these actually in the Vice News listing of the threats. Anything else new here? Oh, here's Lenny Dykstra's tweet, though. Interestingly enough, he tweets, I hope you all weren't expecting that the synagogue where go ahead and raid Trump Judge Bruce Reinhardt is on the board of trustees is one where the congregation keeps kosher, observes the Sabbath, etc. You can bet they're into social justice, of course, and then giving their website. Like, I guess Lenny Dykstra is a famous rabbi and a famous critic of conservative Judaism and its practices. That's interesting. Reinhardt was a sworn magistrate judge. We all know about this stuff. He's on the board of trustees of the website, listed on the website of Temple Beth David, a synagogue in Palm Beach Gardens. The synagogue didn't respond to requests for comment. 2 additional warrants were signed by Reinhardt and entered into the court system on Monday, according to the Miami Herald, but remain sealed as of Tuesday afternoon, so we don't even know if they're about Donald Trump or anything like it. Dykstra, a 3-time Major League Baseball All-Star with the Mets and Phillies, who was raised Christian, has stayed in the headlines since his retirement in 1996. The New York Post reported in 2018, months after he was arrested on charges of threatening an Uber driver, that Dykstra was attending weekly Torah study with Rabbi Shmuel Metzger, who was affiliated with the Chabad movement. Charges stemming from the Uber incident were dropped in 2019. Interesting. So is he converting to Judaism, and now he's mad that this temple is totally, definitely not up to his standards of keeping kosher, which who even knows what the hell he's doing in his life. Very interesting. Well, let's see. He also didn't respond to a request for comment, but many on Twitter swiftly denounced his post. That's quite interesting. Reinhardt, who donated $1,000 to Barack Obama's first presidential campaign in 2008 and $500 to Jeb Bush's bid for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016, has had his own history of controversy. Of course, the tenuous connections to Epstein people. Okay. Well, there's quite a bit in here about what those connections are supposed to be. But at any rate, very interesting, and very interesting that not surprising at all, that the attacks have taken an anti-Semitic bent as well. Let's see, other things that I should include in this before, or if we even are able to depart from this subject at all. Let me survey what's here and see what I can share with you. Let's see, that was already covered. Oh, yes, let's go back to what Marcy Wheeler was saying yesterday. This really deserved, I shouted it out at the end of the show, and it really deserved more time. I thought this was actually one of the clearer of her posts. You don't necessarily have to have all background and all of the rest of what she's said for her entire career to understand all the references. This was the one where she was taking apart the piece by piece the jury instructions that somebody would get if they were sitting on a jury considering a case being brought under 18 U.S. Code 793E, which is apparently an espionage statute, which, would make it fairly serious. Like, you don't want former presidents brought up on espionage charges. But here is the post from the 10th. That's now 2 days ago. Everyone is squabbling over whether the DOJ should release more information on the search of Mar-a-Lago. We now have progressed from there, with entirely reasonable people saying that they want the DOJ to have to defend taking documents that the government owns so that we can learn more about what went down. She's there making a very sly reference to earlier points that she made that Greg mentioned yesterday. They were good points. This is not something you would ordinarily handle with the subpoena, but because it was a former president, I guess they also went the subpoena route earlier, we now find out. But you don't have to subpoena documents that belong to the United States government when they're improperly in the hands of a private citizen. A subpoena is something you use to leverage the court's authority to take something that is ostensibly the property of the person who has it in custody, because there's a overriding state interest in bringing it into federal or state or local custody for law enforcement purposes. This belongs to you, but we need it as evidence. That is a subpoena. But of course, I guess once you get to a criminal trial stage, perhaps search warrant is the better tool, especially if you fear that the person will try to obscure, hide, destroy, fold, spindle, or mutilate that evidence before law enforcement gets a hand on it. But when you're looking for evidence of a crime and you know that somebody has something that belongs to someone else that they've stolen, a search warrant is a perfectly reasonable vehicle. Anyway, we may get more clarity more easily than that. That's because if DOJ has any intention of actually charging Donald Trump, remember she was saying that it seems like this would be one of the last things that they would need to do before charging him, is actually grab those documents. As she says, she noted earlier, one of the statutes that's likely on the table for the former president is 18 U.S. Code 793E, which I might as well open up in the browser here and see what the title of this section is. Gathering, transmitting, or losing defense information. 18 U.S. Code Section 793. And I believe she mentioned Reality Winner perhaps had faced charges under this. Yes, as a matter of fact, there it is. Okay, so yesterday I think I skipped over the actual language of the statute in favor of getting on to the other stuff, but why don't we read it now? Basically, this is taking national defense information that you're not authorized to have and refusing to give it back. Whoever having unauthorized possession of, access to, or control over any document, writing, code book, signal book, sketch, photograph, photographic negative, blueprint, plan, map, model, instrument, appliance, or note relating to the national defense, or information relating to the national defense, which information the possessor has reason to believe could be used to the injury of the United States or to the advantage of any foreign nation, whoever has all of this, and then willfully communicates, delivers, transmits, or causes to be communicated, delivered, or transmitted, or attempts to communicate, deliver, transmit, or cause to be communicated, delivered, or transmitted, the same to any person not entitled to receive it, or willfully retains the same and fails to deliver it to the officer or employee of the United States entitled to receive it, will get kicked swiftly in the family jewels. I guess, I don't know. She cuts it off at that point. That's the definition of who's supposed to be in trouble. But where does it leave off here? There's some other parts of it here. Boy, this is the whole thing is dense with just the most egregious and annoying language. Okay, so whoever fails to deliver it to the officer or employees of the United States entitled to receive it, or then there's another provision, F, and then G. Here's what happens. Shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. Anyway, it's a very long thing. We were just reading section E. It goes down to H down here. So anyway, lots of good legalese to get annoyed with. But there's 10 years in prison on the table here. Regular readers of Empty Wheel's site are familiar with this statute because she's covered tons of cases charging it. Reality Winner, that one I recognize, and Hal Martin and Joshua Schulte, among others, who I don't, but I'm sure her other readers do. Reality Winner, though, I thought that came up this morning. I was thinking about the fact that Reality Winner went to jail for doing this, and reality game show host is still playing golf, even though the same statute probably applies to him. But the more interesting exercise was Marcy's look, as she says, when she went back and looked at some pattern jury instructions for the unlawful retention charge. And because of that meeting in June, DOJ has most of what they'll need to charge the former president. June was when they went back to Mar-a-Lago after the January seizure of the 15 boxes. They went back in June and said, we think there's good reason to believe you have much more. Here's a subpoena, for whatever reason, for those materials. And didn't get them, and now they've gone and seized them as evidence so that they can bring the charge. We went in June and we asked, and we know he has them. We can establish that because we found them there. Now the June visit establishes that we have made a request that you were supposed to return it, as it says here, if you've willfully retained this stuff and failed to deliver it to the officer or employee of the United States entitled to receive it. That happened. The search warrant was part of the remedy for your not turning it over to us. We'll grab it back. But other remedies are on the table. Fines and imprisonment. We haven't gotten to those yet, but we can take these things from you because they're not your property, they're ours. So there's no taking of any kind here. You haven't lost life, liberty, or property. No jeopardy has yet attached. You haven't been charged with anything yet, but we can still take that stuff from you. Now, the fact that we have it means we're able to enter it into evidence in a trial against you. That's true, too, and that's the point she's getting at. So, looking at the jury instructions, what will the jury be asked to decide in a case where they have the evidence, they have the also have, of course, the chain of custody that proves that it came from Trump's house, and they also are now able to establish we asked you for it in January, we asked you for it in June, and then we had to take it from you in August because you just wouldn't deliver it up. What will the jury be asked? They would be asked to decide, did the defendant, without authorization, have possession of, access to, or control over a document that was national defense information? Yes, the archives spent a year telling him he was not authorized to have it under the Presidential Records Act. Did the document in question relate to the national defense? Well, we don't know what the documents in question are, although now it's starting to look like they were nuclear secrets. But given Washington Post's description from February, then yes, absolutely, the documents in question related to the national defense. And if it's true that it's about nuclear weapons, I think most people would have very little difficulty concluding that that's national defense information. A bonus fact she adds here, the jury is the one that decides whether something was national defense information, not the former original classification authority, which is the fancy term for the president gets to decide whether something is classified or not. No, it doesn't work that way. In these cases, the jury will decide that. So, if the agency whose document Trump stole is still trying to protect it from hostile powers, and if that agency still believes it's classified, if it remains secret, then a jury is likely to find that it is NDI and it's within their power to do it. Did the defendant have reason to believe the information could be used to the injury of the United States or to the advantage of any foreign nation? Well, Trump is such a psychopath that the answer to this might normally be in question. After all, he routinely treated top-secret intelligence like it was toilet paper or party favors for visiting Russians. Except DOJ went to Trump's residence in June and told him this information could harm the United States. They then wrote him a letter saying that it could harm the United States and could he please at least put a padlock on the basement room that had, up until that point, been accessible to all the suspected foreign assets who've paid the price of admission to Mar-a-Lago. By the way, before I go on here, I wanted to go back just to clarify. It occurred to me, could use some clarification. The previous question, did the documents in question relate to national defense? Or were they classified? What was in them, etc.? You've heard Kash Patel and others now saying, well, the president declassified that information, and we can't necessarily at this point yet prove that he didn't say, I hereby declassify this, though there are some legal fights to be had over whether or not that is effective in reality for legal purposes for declassifying them. Maybe yes, maybe no, but what is also of interest is that for legal purposes, the question is, did the papers contain national defense information? It doesn't say classification comes into it, but national defense information, and that question is up to the jury, not people like Kash Patel or other people who could decide for the purposes of telling the news media whether something is classified or not. Well, he declassified it. Yeah, well, that's not the question. The question is, does it contain national defense information? And guess who gets to decide that? Not Kash Patel, the jury. So I think that's an excellent point to keep in mind here, because people will try, prior to any trial starting or any charges being filed, to say, how can they convict him on it if he is allowed to declassify it? How can you convict him of unlawfully distributing classified information if he can declassify it the moment before he gives it to someone? And the answer is, that's not the question the jury is being asked. The question the jury is being asked is, was there national defense information in it, classified or otherwise? And the answer to how do you figure that out is the jury will decide. And I think once there's nuclear material involved, they'll probably say, yeah, I don't really care that he declassified it the moment before he gave it away. That wasn't really legitimate in my eyes anyway, but it doesn't matter. I don't have to decide that. I just have to decide whether it's NDI, and it is. So let's see. The next question, did the defendant retain this above material and fail to deliver it to the officer or employee of the United States entitled to receive it? Yes. The archives asked and asked and asked, and then DOJ went to his home and asked again, and then they had to go back and just take it. So, did he keep this document willfully? Yes. Again, DOJ asked and asked and asked. Trump exhibited awareness that the archives were asking. He stopped in to say hi when Jay Bratt, the head of the DOJ's espionage section, came to visit. And he still hoarded the document. This may be why Trump claims that nothing was in the hotel safe in his bridal suite, by the way. Keeping these documents at Mar-a-Lago was willful by itself, but keeping such documents in his safe would be proof that he personally was hoarding it. If the FBI really did scoop up highly sensitive documents when they were at Mar-a-Lago the other day, then there may be relatively few steps left to charging him, aside from cataloging the 12 new boxes of stolen documents. DOJ may only need permission from the agencies that own these documents to make the declassifications required to prosecute it. Of course, they may already be declassified, so they'll save a step there too. By going to Mar-a-Lago and asking for these documents in person on June 3rd, DOJ made it very easy to prove that Trump had been asked but refused to give any classified documents found in Trump's possession on Monday back. And an update, here's an indictment from the 973 case that's most similar to the evidence that may be present with Trump. Hal Martin kept taking highly classified documents from home, taking documents home from the CIA and NSA, just like Trump took documents home. In Martin's case, they charged him for 20 documents out of the great swath of documents that he stole. He ultimately pled guilty. With good behavior, he might get released next April. I don't know how long he's been in for that, because I'm just not that familiar. But let me know. So Hal Martin, let's see, does he have a Wikipedia? We'll see what we got here. Hal Martin, Wikipedia. It's probably not the stock car racer. That's the second time that we've had a stock car racer's name confused with everything else here. Is there a disambiguation here somewhere? There he is, Harold T. Martin III, for a former Booz Allen Hamilton contractor suspected of espionage. Let's see, where's the espionage part? While attempting to trace the source of the shadow brokers leak in the summer of 2016, the FBI was alerted by the NSA to an internet post made by Martin, who allegedly communicated via the Twitter account Hal _ and then a bunch of nines, many nines. Let's see. Martin used Twitter to contact Kaspersky Lab, a Russian cybersecurity firm, which in turn alerted the National Security Agency. The FBI originally believed Martin to be the source of the shadow brokers' thefts of NSA hacking tools and used the information provided by Kaspersky researchers to execute a search warrant on Martin's modest residence in suburban Glen Burnie, Maryland. So this was back in 2016. And Marcy said he may get out in next April. So I guess he's spent some considerable amount of time behind bars for that. Anyway, I thought an excellent insight into something that they absolutely could charge him with, and which is an espionage statute. And knowing the jury instructions is very important. This is what happens at the final stage of trial when they ask the jury to render a verdict. These are the list of questions you have to answer in order to convict this person. And all of them are a pretty easy yes at this point. So that's going to be pretty tough for Trump to get around. So, good post. All right, we'll return in 2 minutes, try to close things out. Maybe it's time to see if we can finally jump off of this subject, but you never know what I'm going to read in between then and now.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess I can't get off this subject just yet. There's too much. And, hey, the weekend's coming. You're just going to have to know these things. More from Empty Wheel. This time, a tweet thread reacting to, let's see, was this yesterday? Yeah, yesterday's news cycle or partial day news cycle about that revelation about the subpoena that came in between, I guess, or in the area of June of this year, in between the 12 or 15 boxes being, returned / taken by the National Archives people in January, and then the visit to, I guess, along with the subpoena, the visit to Mar-a-Lago. So that was news yesterday, which was actually quite fascinating. I thought it was really interesting as everybody was talking about that and just thinking about the fact that it was really not very widely discussed and not very widely reported that there had been this subpoena in June. And I was curious about that because it does seem like for all the complaints from the right wing immediately following the search of Mar-a-Lago, oh, this is a stunt. They're just doing it for trying to create bad publicity for Trump and to make it look like he's guilty, is a big politicized use of law enforcement and all done in the name of, stunting and grabbing headlines. And, of course, it's kind of incompatible with that aim if you quietly serve this subpoena and nobody finds out about it or nobody even remembers to say anything about it until the search is conducted in August. So, what about the whole big splashy thing to try to make Trump look bad and it was really just a stunt for publicity, but you let it just sit there from June, and it wasn't a secret. John Solomon had known about it, but nobody had anything to say about it. It's not generating a great deal of, of publicity. Don't you think? That's a little bit weird that we're just finding this out now. Obviously, I think I tweeted about it the other day. Maggie Haberman was now realizing, oh, there was a subpoena. And, I don't know that she was trying to argue any different, but certainly right-wingers were. And to say that we find this out now, well, that's just more ironclad evidence that the search, conducted without, by the way, so much as even an FBI windbreaker in sight, that's how low-key they did it, was all purely about publicity and playing for the cameras, which also weren't present, by the way. And, a grand jury issues a subpoena. It gets served in June. It results in the recovery of still more top-secret documents from Pervalago, but nobody heard about it because of how publicity-hungry the FBI was on this thing, right? That doesn't really jive. So that seems a little out of sorts with what actually happened there. All right, let's see. Let me move back to what I wanted to... Oh, yes, right. It was Empty Wheels tweeting about this. So CNN yesterday, ends up matching John Solomon's report that before the FBI came to seize the stolen documents from Mar-a-Lago, they had originally subpoenaed them. But there's a detail that Solomon, of course, doesn't include in his own discussion of things, which is that DOJ's head of espionage goes to Mar-a-Lago with a subpoena for any documents marked classified, right? And there's many kinds of classification, but I want any documents marked classified. Any one of them, all of them, would be a violation of the Espionage Act that we were discussing before. Trump's attorneys say, well, here are documents marked classified, and they hand them over, which, by the way, establishes proof that their client violated the Espionage Act, so they've got him dead to rights on that one, and that he didn't comply with the Presidential Records Act either, if that's even important to you, given that he's clearly violated the Espionage Act. But so what happens here is Trump, the reporting from CNN says, Trump was present at the beginning of the meeting to greet investigators but did not stay to answer questions. During the meeting, Trump's attorneys showed the investigators documents. Some of them had markings indicating that they were classified. The agents were given custody of these documents that were marked top secret or higher, according to a person familiar with the matter. But that's not the end of the inquiry. As Marcy puts it, they only gave the top secret and higher documents back. That is to say, there were other classified documents that they said, well, these aren't classified enough for us to give them back to you. But they don't have to be a certain level of classification. Classification is enough. So, when the FBI wrote an affidavit for violations of the Espionage Act, they said, here's how I know that Trump has classified documents and won't give them back. Remember, that's the elements of the crime. We know that he's got them. He knows that he's got them. He knows that he shouldn't have them, and he won't give them back. How do we know this? Here's how I know. We subpoenaed them. His attorneys showed them to us and then refused to give them back. Open and shut. The judge will ask, why do you think this man committed a crime? You want a search warrant from me? What makes you think he committed a crime? The FBI says, because his attorneys showed us the proof and then colluded in that crime by not giving him to us. Even crazier still, remember how Trump got caught with boxes and boxes of documents, including classified ones back in January, February? He said, well, oops, that won't happen again. But guess what? It happened again. He was still holding on to top secret and higher documents when they showed up in June. That's a clear violation that he committed this crime in January, February, much less that he did it again in June. So what are you going to do? You got to prosecute at some point. So now the judge says, well, why do you think he still has top secret documents? Well, the FBI says because he told us that he didn't have any in February, and then in June, his lawyers proved him wrong by showing us the documents that were top secret. So what am I supposed to think? Empty Wheel goes on to say, I've been talking about 18 U.S. Code 793E, but here's what 793F criminalizes, that part we didn't read earlier. If you steal classified documents and let your lawyers without clearance go wade through them, right? Remember, the lawyers who then answer the doorbell when the FBI shows up in June with their counter-espionage chief and asks, do you still have documents that you didn't give us when we were here in February? And they say, yeah, here, let me give them to you. Here, look, see, I'm cooperating with you by giving you these documents. Not all the documents, but at least these documents. The next question is, so this classified top secret document that you've just searched in the box for, identified by site and handed over to me, what's your classification? What classified material are you authorized to answer? What's your security clearance? Oh, I don't have one, actually. Okay. I mean, I don't want to alarm you or anything, but you're doing this search and cooperating and giving me these things is actually a violation of the Espionage Act all by itself. You don't have clearance to search these things. What are you doing? This is also clear evidence that Donald Trump gives unauthorized people access to classified documents. You dummies. What's wrong with you? Well, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I know how I'm going to fix it. You're all under arrest. So that's 793F. If you steal classified documents and then let your lawyers who don't have clearance go wade through them, that's a separate violation of the Espionage Act, you idiot. How so? Whoever being entrusted with or having lawful possession or control of any document, oh, well, he might not have lawful possession. Let's read on. Writing, code book, signal book, sketch, photograph, photographic negative, blueprint, plan, map, model, instrument, appliance, note, or information relating to the national defense. 1, through gross negligence, permits the same to be removed from its proper place of custody or delivered to anyone in violation of his trust, or to be lost, stolen, abstracted, or destroyed. Or 2, having knowledge of the same, has been illegally removed from its proper place of custody or delivered to anyone in violation of its trust, or lost or stolen, abstracted or destroyed, and fails to make prompt report of such loss, theft, abstraction, destruction to his superior officer, if there is one for Donald Trump, shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. Well, we might have to parse that one, but an interesting question nonetheless. But it certainly could be the case that legal jeopardy is created for the lawyers who responded to the June subpoena on his behalf. That's not going to go great. All right, other things to answer here. We were talking back on Wednesday and Thursday about whether or not we thought this would come to anything. I guess now that we're establishing that there really was top secret information still in his possession and that some of it had to do with nuclear issues of some kind, nuclear weapons and materials, it's becoming less and less likely that they don't prosecute. But remember, we were going back and forth and discussing this a little bit, and Darwin was also speculating. It could be that they were simply pursuing an open and shut case about documents that weren't national security information, but were nonetheless supposed to be the property of the archives, and he was withholding from them. And we have to agree that's a possibility. On the other hand, I will offer you this speculative thread from Twitter personality Kilgore Trout, who says, in response to Asha Rangapa's tweet, Asha saying, FYI, the reason Trump Republicans, or it says Trump GOP, are trying to push the FBI planting evidence story is that they are trying to get ahead of how sensitive the documents Trump was hiding and the $1 million follow-up question, why the hell would he take such documents and what did he plan to do with them? They're trying to get ahead of that by saying, well, I never took them at all. They were planted. Because obviously I wouldn't take top secret nuclear sensitive documents because that's just crazy. Anyway, Kilgore Trout has this speculation to add to it. Again, he says, in an era where everybody has a document duplicating device in their pocket, it's hard for me to believe that this was about what he planned to do with them and not about what he already did with them. You tell me what makes more sense. That's a good point. So what makes more sense? We got to get in there and set the world on its ass, taking back those documents before he does something that he could have been doing for the last 18 months. Or we have hard proof that those documents have already moved and we got to set the world on its ass proving where they came from. That is damn good point, right? To sit around and say, well, he could have taken a picture on a smartphone of these documents and distributed them instantly around the world to the other side of the globe to anybody who was asking or anybody who he thought was asking on behalf of somebody else. And he could have done that for the past 18 months. Is it really more likely that that didn't happen and that they had to do it by search warrant, knowing what repercussions it would bring? That they did that because, well, 18 months is long enough, but 19 months is the breaking point. That's when we think he'll really move to share these extraordinarily valuable to foreign governments documents with anybody. Or is it really, we already know that those documents have been photographed and sent someplace. The Russians, the Chinese, the Koreans, somebody has got a hold of these things, the Saudis. And what we need to do is figure out where they came from, and once we figure it out, go and bust that guy's ass and get the documents back so that we can start the prosecution ASAP. That does sound a little more likely than the idea of, well, he hasn't done anything with him for 18 months, but you never know what's going to happen next month. I guess it's time to go there with a search warrant. He continues, I got news for you. If those documents had any value, resale, extortion, whatever, Trump still has possession of them in some form, by the way, right? Just because the feds took a box doesn't mean, whoopsie, they're gone now. That makes no sense to imagine this risk, or that this raid was risk mitigation, right? Of the fact that they've got the boxes and the documents are in it, like, we got them now. The whole point was that they could be reproduced simply, easily, quietly, surreptitiously by anybody, because everybody's got, as he puts it, a document reproduction device in their pocket. The dude, as he says, sat on him for 18 months. All he had to do was find some doofus Federalist Society fascist intern to put them all on a USB stick that he stashed in a safe deposit box in Switzerland under the name Elvis Presley. Even for Trump, that's eminently achievable. He still has the documents. That's highly likely. The feds weren't mitigating anything. Let's edit a little bit. They weren't mitigating the S word, everybody. They weren't mitigating anything. They were locking down the origin of something they already knew. The Trump circle jumped onto planted evidence almost instantaneously, and the Gentry GOP followed suit, amplifying it. This isn't what you do unless you know the feds have something more interesting than slowly moldering boxes of paper. And then he adds at the end, this seems pertinent. Something from Laura Rosen, a thread that begins June 22nd. This is a timeline thread. June 22nd, federal investigators served a subpoena for surveillance video at Mar-a-Lago, seeking to ascertain who had access to areas where documents were stored. And then June 24th, the Politico reports that Trump directed NARA to give access to Jay, Solomon, and Patel. And then according to Politico, on 6/24, Solomon said Trump specifically directed the archives to give him access, John Solomon, direct access to the documents related to the Russia probe that were declassified in the final days of the administration. And he said the archives have been cooperative and accommodating. Okay, so that's sort of side story. But I guess what Kilgore Trout found interesting about it was the request for the surveillance video. What they're doing now is, and it fits more with his narrative, that they're asking for those video surveillance tapes. The narrative being, well, these documents are out now. Somebody who shouldn't have them, not including Donald Trump, who should never have had them, but some foreign national perhaps who shouldn't have these things, has got them. They've got a photograph of them taken by a smartphone. It may actually be Donald Trump's smartphone, but you can't necessarily prove that he's the one that took the pictures. What if somebody, an aide, takes his phone, goes into the storage room, photographs the documents on the phone, texts them away, and then returns the phone? And Trump will say, I didn't do it. I don't know anything about it. I don't understand. Maybe the picture is deleted from his phone. Maybe it's true and he knows nothing about it. Well, then what we'll want to know is who at some point walks into that room with no other explanation, and when? And more specifically, does anybody walk into that room minutes before the document shows up on Mr. Bonesaw's iPhone? And if so, shouldn't we talk to that person? Or does Donald Trump walk in there and do that? In which case, his idea of, I didn't know anything about it, becomes less plausible, let's say. So I guess that's out there too. I think that's worth noting, and tends to argue in favor of more serious charges actually maybe materializing from this thing. Okay. What do you make of that? That's pretty good. All right. I think we've got maybe all of the Mar-a-Lago seizure news, although who knows, something may have happened during the show that I haven't been able to read about yet. Let's see. Here's at least one tip. Asparagus Zucchini sending me something. What is it? Asparagus Zucchini replying to Mary Pat Flynn. Which Flynn is this? What are we talking about? Let's trace it back. Begins with empty wheel. Maybe, just work with me here, she says. Before anyone else does a piece reporting Trump's cooperation with efforts to obtain stolen documents, you at least get his lawyers to say yes or no whether 18 U.S. Code 793 was mentioned in the warrant. Interesting question. Mary Pat Flynn responding with, text from the code. Whoever, for the purpose of obtaining information respecting the national defense with intent or reason to believe that the information is to be used for the injury of the United States, and then Asparagus Zucchini jumping in with Section E. Okay, so we're back to Section E. Just showing me that you've been discussing Section E of late with Empty Wheel and others, or was there more to it? All right, feel free, if you can, to chime in quickly before we close things out for the day and the week. All right, do you want something weird and not directly political necessarily that you could occupy yourself with worrying about over the course of the weekend? Here's one from the New York Post, which is terrible and disgusting, but, this story would sort of be up their alley. So totally removed from everything. I don't know whether it's a palate cleanser or not, because it's just going to give you even more of a dirty feeling than the rest of what we've covered here today. But I found it interesting. How about this? OnlyFans, that weird, there's this, we haven't discussed it too much, but I'm aware of what this platform is. It is a sort of a direct communications platform between, either celebrities in some cases, or people who become quasi-celebrities for being online content providers. Basically, share their content with subscriber fans. That is OnlyFans. And it's like a locked thing, and you have to pay for the content. And it could be anything, but the nature of this particular platform has lent itself to becoming mostly famous for amateur or professional nude models and porn stars sharing their content that they create directly with their fans in exchange for subscriptions. That's just chiefly what it's become used for. Anyway, so it's another online social media type platform for, in the case of people who begin their lives as non-celebrities, to become quasi-famous for doing just that. Everyone would like to see pictures of, person X naked. So person X, rather than waiting for those pictures to be stolen by someone else and monetized that way, takes the pictures themselves and sells them to their fans. Okay, fine, whatever. OnlyFans has now, it turns out, bribed Meta, which is the weird, stupid new name that really isn't catching on for Facebook and their parent companies. OnlyFans bribed Meta to put thousands of porn stars on terror watch lists, according to some lawsuits. Now, some of the Puritans and others out there would probably say, good, that's a good thing to do. But wait until you find out exactly what's going on here and why. OnlyFans apparently squashed competitors in the online porn industry. That is to say, if you decided that you didn't want, I guess there's fees associated with OnlyFans, and when people subscribe, OnlyFans gets a portion of the subscription. And if you want that to be a lower portion, you could, I guess, go to a competitor, only something else. I don't know what. Fans, haters, I don't know. But some other farmersonlyfans.com, something else could start up. There'll be a conservative startup version of it somewhere where the fees are lower or something like that. Well, OnlyFans didn't like that. So they squashed competitors in the online porn industry with the help of a bizarre scheme that bribed Meta employees to throw thousands of porn stars who would try this, going to another platform, onto a terrorist watch list, according to a group of explosive lawsuits. Adult performers who sold X-rated photos and videos on rival sites saw their Instagram accounts falsely tagged as containing terrorist content, crippling their ability to promote their business and devastating their incomes, according to the suits. All the money that they were collecting online would then be either confiscated or the accounts frozen because they're now on a terror watch list. What's so terrorist-y about it or terrorizing about it? Nothing in particular, unless you just think, these people are particularly terrifying when they're naked. I guess that could be. Sellers of smutty pictures, remember this is the New York Poster, they revel in this, but they love tutting at this stuff too, if it sells papers. Sellers of smutty pictures were then shadow banned, if they can believe that, across Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and other sites, the suits allege. Maybe they're lying, I don't know. Targeted accounts also included businesses, celebrities, influencers, and others who, quote, have nothing to do with terrorism, according to the suits. Or so they claim. Anyway, when I heard that my content may be listed on the terror watch list, I was outraged. Alana Evans, an adult performer, that's what they call it, and one of the plaintiffs in the California suit alongside Kelly Pierce and others, told the Post, I was angry because it affected my income when my social media traffic dropped significantly, and I was angry because I am the daughter of a veteran who fought for this country. I don't know if that veteran is all necessarily happy with what you're doing or invoking the fact that he's a veteran to try to get out of this trouble, but they throw that in there. Even adult performers come from upstanding families. So, whatever. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Anyway, Evans and others were all allegedly placed in a database of terror-linked accounts run by the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, or GIFCT, a nonprofit group. We've outsourced this, I guess. A nonprofit group intended to stop the spread of mass shooting videos and other terrorist content across social media sites. Like a good purpose. But okay. After adult performers who used rival sites allegedly had their names added to the GIFCT's list, traffic to the rival sites drastically fell, the suits allege. Meanwhile, OnlyFans' traffic and profits soared as the site became a household name. I don't know if it's necessarily household, but okay. Law firm Milberg, Coleman, Bryson, Phillips, Grossman, gosh, every name in the book is in this one, is representing the plaintiffs in suits filed against Meta and OnlyFans. The lawyers claim they have acquired a list of more than 21,000 Instagram accounts that they say were unfairly tagged as potential terrorists. Previously unreported California Superior Court filings now show. In a statement to the Post, Milberg partner David Azar called on Meta and the GIFCT to open up their records to help figure out whether our clients and their content are indeed on any databases intended for terrorists and how to get them off. And that doesn't mean what you think it means. OnlyFans people. We know how to get them off, but we mean get them off the terrorist watch list. Jeez. In a statement to the Post, OnlyFans said, we are aware that these cases have been filed. We are not aware of any evidence which supports these allegations. The alleged participants have all publicly stated that these cases have no merit. Meta did not respond to requests for comment, but told the BBC, which first reported the bribery allegations, that it had investigated and found no evidence that the terror database had been abused. Now, I don't know if I see it mentioned here, but I'm pretty sure when I first saw this thing, and we're running out of time to read the rest of it, but you by all means can take it and read it over the weekend, and it is something you should be caught up on. But a related story was tweeted around connected to this, which alleges that, I guess, at some point, some of these Facebook employees got wise to what was going on, and they put 2 and 2 together in a very interesting way. Meta's being bribed, or Meta employees are being bribed to put adult performers, as they term it now, rather than saying porn stars or whatever, or X-rated porn stars, or what do we say, nude models who maybe aren't in porn. I don't know, but whatever. But there's widespread interest among people of all sorts in adult performers. But once they caught wind that they were abusing the system but harming these performers, and that these performers were desperate to get themselves off of the terror watch list, people apparently put 2 and 2 together and said, is there something you could do for me personally that I might be willing to exchange for getting your name removed from those terror watch lists, which are apparently under my control because I'm a Facebook employee. And apparently there was a thriving trade, and I'll tell you what, I bet you could probably think of something that I, as an adult performer, might be willing to do for you, even though I have no prior relationship with you, in exchange for some other thing of value, i.e. getting off of the terrorism watch list. What an exquisite scheme. I hope they all had a great, great time. I doubt that was the case.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, that went in an unexpected direction, I guess. I mean, for the show. I knew I was going to bring you that story all along. But if you want to get back to, relevant stuff, no problem, because Justice Putnam comes next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He'll bring you back on topic, although, hey, maybe he wants to discuss this too. Just for fun. It's Friday. See you next week.